Hi, I am Dr. Arsalan. I am publishing this video in continuation to my previous video on neurotransmitters. In this video, we will discuss about the types and functions of neurotransmitters. Uh, Neurotransmitters are basically endogenous chemicals. This means that these are synthesized in the nervous system or even neurons of the body for transmission of nerve impulses. Neurotransmitters are basically endogenous chemicals which transmit the nerve impulse from one neuron to other neuron passing through the synapse. So neurotransmitters are basically required to transmit the impulses through chemical synapse because this is a larger gap of about 20 nanometer or more than 20 nanometer in which the electrical depolarization is insufficient. So here the nervous system is dependent upon the chemical messengers to transmit the information from one neuron to other neuron. So these chemical messengers, we had discussed earlier that there are more than 100 known neurotransmitters, and human brain comprise of 86 billion neurons. It is estimated number that more than 86 billion neurons are present in the human brain. So far, we will discuss the neurotransmitter glutamate. It's also called glutamic acid. Glutamate, it is excitatory in nature. It means that when it binds to the receptors on dendritic end, it transfers the impulse from the axon terminal of one neuron to the dendrite terminal of other neuron, and it causes depolarization of the postsynaptic neuron. Therefore, we can say this is excitatory neurotransmitter. Glutamate is the most prevalent excitatory neurotransmitter, and about 90% of the chemical synapses are covered by this glutamate neurotransmitter. So it's the most prevalent neurotransmitter in human brain or nerve system, causing excitation. And sometimes this excitation may be increased to the worst condition and cause excitotoxicity, which cause death of neurons, shock and stroke, etc. So it may lead to a pathological condition if it exceeds from its normal amount. It is basically synthesized from alpha-ketoglutarate. Alpha-ketoglutarate is the substrate, intermediate substrate of citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle. Glutamate is synthesized in the glial cells or presynaptic neurons. We know that the neuron just before the synapse is called presynaptic. This is the synaptic cleft, and this is the postsynaptic. So the presynaptic neurons comprises of vesicles in which the neurotransmitters are contained. So basically these are synthesized by the presynaptic neurons or glial cells. Glial cells are basically the collection of cell bodies of the neurons. Chemical formula is C5H9NO4. It means that it is made up of four types of atoms: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen and oxygen. The function of glutamate are, these are basically glutamate is precursor of GABA. We will discuss later on that what is GABA. GABA aminobutyric acid. This is the inhibitory neurotransmitter which is synthesized from glutamate. Glutamate is required for long-term potentiation in hippocampus for the purpose of learning and memory, or the storage of memory for a long term in the hippocampus. We need glutamate in our nervous system. Neuronal networks are also constituted by the glutamate, and CNS repair is also executed by the glutamate. So this was the first neurotransmitter. The second neurotransmitter is GABA. Its abbreviation is gamma aminobutyric acid. It is the most prevalent inhibitory neurotransmitter of the nervous system of human beings. It is inhibitory in nature, as we have discussed in the previous neurotransmitter, that it is derived from glutamate, or glutamate serves as precursor for GABA. GABA neurotransmitters are synthesized in the GABAergic neurons in the cytoplasm of the presynaptic ends of these GABAergic neurons. The GABA are synthesized. The chemical formula of GABA is C4H9NO2. It means that GABA are derived from four elements: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen and oxygen. Functions: GABA inhibitor reduces the neuronal excitability. These inhibitors decreases the excitation of neurons and stop the nerve impulse transmission. If these GABA inhibitors are increased in concentration, these may cause seizures and anxiety because if these GABA inhibitors are elevated, the nerve impulse transmission will be reduced or stopped, which may cause seizure and anxiety. The GABA inhibitors manage the psychological conditions, including stress, anxiety, depression, panic, or fear conditions. These are basically related to mood and emotions of the body of the human being, and therefore, in developed countries, the GABA inhibitors are used in the food supplements. Next is dopamine. Dopamine is a dual nature neurotransmitter. It behaves both as excitatory as well as inhibitory neurotransmitter. It is made up of tyrosine amino acid. It is monoamine neurotransmitter, that is, it is made up of one type of amino acid, the tyrosine. The neurons which produce this dopamine are called dopaminergic neurons. These are located in the substantia nigra and ventral tegmental area of the midbrain of human. These both areas are located in the midbrain of human being. The formula is C8H11NO2. Again, it is also made up of these four kinds of elements. Functions. Dopamine stimulates growth hormones. It boosts the growth hormone. If the levels of dopamine are increased, the growth hormone will ultimately be increased. The dopamine is concerned with the unique capability and capacity of human brain, that is planning, analysis, thinking. Moreover, it improves pleasure. Dopamine is the stimulant of pleasure. For example, if we have good foods, we see beautiful things, then the excitement, the pleasure we have in our nervous system is due to release of dopamine. Dopamine is also concerned with the motor control. It's very much important. Motor control means it controls the body movement. For example, the transmission of impulses from motor neurons to the effectors, to the muscles, glands, etc. This is called motor control. So this is also maintained by dopamine. Dopamine improves focus and attention of the body. It is also called prolactin inhibition factor. Prolactin inhibition factor means that if the levels of dopamine are increased, prolactin hormone, which is required for the synthesis of milk, is reduced. So prolactin hormone is reduced by the dopamine secretion. Neurotransmitter is epinephrine. Epinephrine is also called adrenaline. It is excitatory in nature. It improves the nerve impulse transmission. It is made up of tyrosine amino acid in the adrenal glands. Chiefly, the epinephrine is hormone. It acts as neurotransmitters, but it is basically a hormone. While norepinephrine, this is chiefly neurotransmitter. The chemical formula of epinephrine is C9H13NO3. Functions. Epinephrine is related to triple F responses. This is basically the emergency condition of the body. It refers to flight, fight, and fright conditions. Flight, fright, and fight. Flight is basically the condition of excitement, fright is the fear, and fight is the anger. All of these are the emergency conditions of the body which are present in the sympathetic nervous system. These are the characteristics of sympathetic nervous system in which the epinephrine or adrenaline is secreted and it manages the body in emergency conditions. For example, the pupils are dilated, the breathing rate or ventilation is increased, the heartbeat is increased, the blood from the peripheral areas circulates towards the vitral and visceral areas. These are all the signs and symptoms in which the sympathetic nervous system is activated and it tries to manage the body conditions in emergency situation. It also causes glycogenolysis. It means that the epinephrine or adrenaline, if it is increased in higher amount, it will break down the glycogen stock in the muscles and liver into the glucose and ultimately the blood glucose level will increase. The receptors of norepinephrine are used by this epinephrine because epinephrine, basically I have told you that epinephrine is chiefly a hormone. It doesn't have its particular receptors in the neurons. So it is resembling to the norepinephrine in composition and structure. Therefore, it uses the receptors of norepinephrine, and it attached the receptor of norepinephrine for excitation of nerve impulse transmission. The fifth neurotransmitter is norepinephrine. It is also called noradrenaline. It is excitatory in nature, just like the epinephrine. It is also made up of tyrosine amino acid, but it is secreted from adrenal gland, particularly the medullary region of the adrenal gland. Adrenal gland has two regions. The outer region is called cortex, and the inner region is called medulla. For example, it is adrenal gland. The outer region is called cortex, and the inner region is called medulla. So it is secreted from the adrenal medullary region. R. Postganglionic neurons. Postganglionic neurons refers to the neurons. These refers to the basically ganglion. Ganglion are the collection of cell bodies of neurons. So when the nerves or the fibers are arising from the ganglion to the effectors for transmission of impulses, such situation is called postganglionic neurons. When the nerve fibers are arising from the ganglion of the neurons to the effectors. So at this stage, the norepinephrine is secreted. Formula is C8H11NO3. Again, these four elements are constituting this neurotransmitter. Functions. It increases and improves alertness of the body. It increases consciousness or vigilance of the body. This is also stress hormone. It maintains and manages the body in emergency conditions of sympathetic nervous system so that the organ failure may not occur. Speed of reaction time or the speed of response of the body is also improved by the release of norepinephrine hormone in case of especially reflex actions. It is also involved with the cognitive functions. Cognitive functions refers to the functions pertaining to the brain, for example, alertness, the perception, attention, focus, learning, memory, all these characteristics are called cognitive functions. So norepinephrine also controls the cognitive functions of the body. Serotonin is inhibitory in nature. It stops the nerve impulse transmission. It is made up of tryptophan amino acid. Tryptophan amino acid is required for the synthesis of serotonin in the brainstem and gastrointestinal tract. Brainstem refers to the part of the brain which is made up of three components lying in a plane just like a stem. These are midbrain. Just beneath the midbrain is pons, below which is lying the medulla oblongata. So these three components, the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata, these are lying in a plane and constitute the brain stem. So these serotonin are basically synthesized in the brainstem and gastrointestinal tract. Formula is C10H12N2O. Function. In congregation to the platelets, the serotonin help in blood clotting the hemostasis. It also help in thermoregulation, the maintenance of body temperature. It is inhibitory in nature, so it will reduce the pain stimulation. Social behavior. Next is digestion, appetite, mood and emotions. This is serotonin is basically concerned with the digestion and appetite, also with mood and emotions. Seventh neurotransmitter is histamine. Histamine is excitatory neurotransmitter. It is made up of histidine amino acid in the neurons located in hypothalamus. It's also made from and synthesized from mast cells and basophils. Hypothalamus is the part of brain. Mast cells are the type of connective tissues, and basophils these are the type of white blood cells. Chemical formula is C5H9N3. It is made up of three type of elements: carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. Functions: histamine maintains blood pressure. It is important for maintenance and regulation of blood pressure of the body. It is important for wakefulness and arousal conditions. It also increases the sexual arousal and sexual responses. It mediates inflammation. It is also called, therefore, histamine is also called inflammatory mediator because it causes inflammation in viral or bacterial infections the inflammation of that organ or the body parts occur. This is just due to release of histamine. It increases the stomach acidity. Gastric acids are increased if histamines are released. Vasodilation is due to histamine for maintenance of blood pressure, and bronchoconstriction in case of allergic conditions. The bronchoconstriction occur, the suffocation occur. This is just released due to release of histamine. When histamine is released, the bronchoconstriction and suffocation will occur. Next neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is one of the notorious neurotransmitters. It's abbreviated as ACH. It is excitatory in nature. It is made up of acetic acid and choline combination and is secreted by the motor neurons. The neurons which carry the impulses from CNS central nervous system to the effectors to the muscles and glands are called motor neurons. Chemical formula is C7NH16O2. So it's made up of four types of elements: carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen. Functions: the acetylcholine maintains and regulates the sleep cycle of the body of the individual. It has motor controls, therefore, muscle functions and muscle movements are also regulated by the secretion of acetylcholine. Sleep is sleep cycle is controlled by the acetylcholine, so we see dreams in the sleep. These dreams are due to secretions of the acetylcholine. Moreover, the cognitive conditions, cognitive functions of the brain, like arousal, attention, motivation, these wakefulness, learning, etc., these are also controlled by the acetylcholine. Poisons, some poisons, for example, the poisons of Clostridium botulism. The bacteria Clostridium botulinum secretes a toxic or poisonous material and cause a disease called botulism. These botulinum poisons, these bind to the receptors of acetylcholine and stop the impulse transmission to the muscles from motor neurons, causing muscle paralysis, which is fatal condition. So these poisons block the acetylcholine, in turn, in turn of which the motor neurons cannot transmit impulses to the effectors, the muscles and glands to perform their function. So muscle paralysis, body paralysis occur due to the blockage of acetylcholine receptors. Next is the gaseous neurotransmitter, carbon monoxide. It is excitatory in nature, made up of carbon and oxygen atoms. It is generated in the neurons by enzymatic cleavage of hemoglobin by heme oxygenase. The hemoglobin C55H72O5N4Fe. It is broken down by this heme oxygenase enzyme, releasing the carbon monoxide neurotransmitters. Chemical formula is CO. It stimulates the vasopressin neuronal activity. Vasopressin is antidiuretic hormone. When this vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone is released in the body, it reduces the urine output by absorbing more and more water from the nephrons, from the kidneys, to maintain the volume and osmolarity of blood plasma. For example, if the blood volume is going on decreasing, so antidiuretic hormone is released so that more and more water can be reabsorbed from the kidneys and nephrons to maintain the volume of the blood plasma. As it is gaseous neurotransmitter, so it cannot be stored in the presynaptic neurons in their vesicles, just like other neurotransmitters. So these neurotransmitters, carbon monoxide, are spontaneously synthesized immediately at the time of need. These are synthesized, and these are co-localized with nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the another gaseous neurotransmitter. Another gaseous neurotransmitter is nitric oxide. It is inhibitory in nature. It is synthesized by neuronal nitric oxide synthase enzyme, which produces nitric oxide in brain. Neuronal nitric oxide synthase enzyme. Chemical composition is nitrogen and oxygen. It causes vasodilation. Vasodilation means increase the diameter of the blood vessels. It causes vasodilation in turn reduces the blood pressure but increases the blood supply to the different body parts and organs. So it maintains the blood supply by reducing the blood pressure and increasing the blood volume to the 11th neurotransmitter is oxytocin. It behaves both like neurotransmitter as well as hormone. It is produced in the hypothalamus and transported to the pituitary gland for secretion into the blood. It is excitatory in nature. Chemical formula, it's a larger molecule. Its chemical formula is C43, I66, N12O12, S2. So it is made up of five elements: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and sulfur. The functions of oxytocin are very much clear. The oxytocin establishes the social bonds of the human individuals. These are related to the social responses of the individual and alter the fear responses. Moreover, in females, labor, labor pains or uterine contractions are due to release of oxytocin hormone at the end of the or termination stage of the pregnancy. The oxytocin is released, which cause labor pains and uterine contractions to expel the fetus from their womb. And also it causes milk letdown. Milk is produced by the prolactin, while release of milk from the teat canals, it is accompanied by the oxytocin secretion. So it is called milk letdown, the removal or release of milk from the teat canals. Next neurotransmitter is the vasopressin. It also acts as hormone as well as neurotransmitter. It serves both excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters, so you can say it is of dual nature. It can serve excitatory as well as inhibitory neurotransmitter depending upon the situation or depending upon the stance where it is needed. It is made in the pituitary gland. It is a larger molecule made up of C46, H65, N15, O12, S2. It's made up of five elements: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and sulfur. Functions: as we have discussed in the neurotransmitters of carbon monoxide, that the vasopressin, basically these are antidiuretic hormones. When the blood volume is going on decreasing due to hemorrhages, due to over sweating, due to dehydration, etc., the blood volume, if it is decreasing, then antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin will be secreted from the pituitary gland. It will be released and it will reaccumulate, reabsorb the water from the kidneys and nephrons to cover blood plasma volume and osmolality. So it is basically desired for the maintenance of blood volume. Circadian rhythms are also controlled by it. Circadian rhythms are those events which are repeated after a consistent or regular interval. For example, we fall asleep every night, so it is repeated after 24 hours. For example, sometimes in some cases the breeding seasons are repeated, the migration seasons are repeated after a particular interval. These are called circadian rhythms. These are also maintained by vasopressin. The blood pressure and temperature control, thermoregulation, and blood pressure are also maintained by the vasopressin. Kidney functions, as we have discussed, that the reabsorption of water from the nephrons and kidneys are maintained by vasopressin. If it is increased, then the urine output will be decreased, and if the vasopressin is decreased, the urine output will increase. Next neurotransmitter is adenosine. It is inhibitory in nature. It means that it stops the nerve impulse transmission across the synapse. It is made from the adenosine monophosphate. It can be synthesized both from intracellular fluid as well as extracellular fluid. In intracellular fluid, for example, the fluid within the cell, that is cytoplasm or nucleoplasm, this can also synthesize the adenosine from adenosine monophosphate. By removing the phosphate group from the adenosine monophosphate, adenosine will synthesize. In this way, adenosine will be synthesized by removing the phosphate group from adenosine monophosphate. Also, it may also be synthesized from extracellular fluid. The extracellular fluid may be blood or lymph. Blood or lymph may also synthesize adenosine in this way. It is Its chemical formula is C10H13N5O4. The adenosine are basically CNS depressants, as these are inhibitory in nature. So these neurotransmitters will reduce the nerve impulse transmission in the CNS, so it will depress the CNS system and will promote the sleep. Also, if the adenosine are decreased, wakefulness and alertness will occur. So these are inversely proportional to the wakefulness and alertness. It also causes dilation of coronary blood vessels. So it is an important function that the coronary blood vessels, these are the blood vessels which supply blood to the cardiac cells, to the muscles of the heart. And if the supply is interrupted, it will cause cardiac arrest or heart attack. So if adenosine is sufficient, the coronary blood vessels will be dilated and improved and boosted blood supply will be ensured to the cardiac muscles, and heart will beat with continuous rhythm with more powerful manner. Next neurotransmitter is somatostatin. Its literal meaning is somato, it refers to the body cells, statin, static or stop. So it basically stops the growth of the body cells. It stops the growth hormone. Somatostatin is inhibitory in nature. It is secreted from delta cells of islets of Langerhans. These are the cells of pancreas. So somatostatin is released from the pancreas. It's a larger molecule made up of 76 carbons, 104 hydrogens, 18 nitrogen, 19 oxygen and 2 sulfur atoms. Functions: stops nerve impulse transmission. It causes cell differentiation and proliferation. Proliferation means increased number of cells, and differentiation means when cells organize into different type of tissues and organs. So this organization into different sorts of tissues, organ systems is called cell differentiation. So it reduces cell proliferation and increases cell differentiation. It means that it reduces the number of cells to be increased. Rather, it improves the cell differentiation into different compartments, different organizations to form different type of organ systems. It also inhibits the growth hormones. Last neurotransmitter which we are going to discuss is the opioid. Opioids are basically, this is the class of neurotransmitters. For example, cannabis, the morphine, the uh, marijuana, all of these fall into the class of opioids. Opioids are basically inhibitory in nature. These may be synthesized by the neurons of central nervous system or peripheral nervous system. These may be synthesized from adrenal glands or pituitary glands. So it means that opioids here are endogenous, which are synthesized in the body. These may also be taken from outside. These are called exogenous opioids. For example, the drug addicts, they used to take the opioids from external sources from the environment by oral, by intramuscular, intravenous, or sniffing. And these routes can also introduce the opioids from the outside to the body. This is called exogenous opioids. But here we will discuss the endogenous opioids which are synthesized in the body in neurons, adrenal, and pituitary glands. Now, opioids, I have told you that opioids is a class in which different drugs are included. For example, morphine. So the formula of morphine is C17H19NO3. The opioids, all of these opioids are used as analgesics. These are pain reliever drugs, painkiller drugs. These stimulate appetite. These can be used as anesthetics. So these were the medical uses of opioids. Despite of these medical uses, some of the people, they use these opioids in abnormally high concentrations. This is called drug abuse.